Well, the weather outside is frightful if you're joining us from the Cleveland area. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Ursuline College's 2020 Founders Day celebration. I'm Sharonda Peterson, President of the Alumni Board of Ursuline and St. John Colleges, and we'd like to welcome you once again. I'm also your virtual MC for today. As you know, this format is not our original plan. We were looking forward to hosting two separate in-person events. We were all set to have hundreds of people join us at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse to honor Sister Helen Prejean with our Women Who Light the Way Award in honor of her example of leadership and dedication. Then we were going to host an in-person Founders Day to celebrate you all and thank you, our most generous and loyal supporters. And at the same time, honor our brave foundress, Mother Mary of the Annunciation Beaumont. Of course, March had its own madness in store for us, but Sister Helen kept the beignets warm for us, and here we are. As your MC for the afternoon, it's my job to provide a brief overview of today's program. We'll start with a few words from our president, Sister Christine DeVinny, then Elizabeth McIntyre, editor of Crane's Cleveland Business, and one of our newest members on the Board of Trustees, will interview Sister Helen. After that, we'll take a few audience questions, so be thinking of some good ones. I'll ask you to submit your questions using the chat function, which you should see near the bottom of your screen. After she fields a few of your questions, Sister Helen will accept our award and share a few more thoughts. Just a couple of technical tips to share with you all today. We suggest you choose the speaker view rather than gallery view, which is located in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Also, if you're having any difficulties hearing, you may consider wearing earbuds or headsets, or even simply adjusting the volume on your laptops. At this time, please join me in welcoming Sister Christine DeVinny, 17th President and proud graduate of Ursuline College.
Thank you, Sharonda. Thanks to all of you in our virtual audience today for joining us now and for having supported the college over the past year and the past years. I extend my personal thanks to Sister Helen Prejean for being with us as our most honored guest speaker. Founders Day is our annual celebration commemorating the founding of the college in 1871 by Mother Mary of the Annunciation Beaumont, as Sharonda just said. We marvel at the courage and tenacity of this 19th century woman who was dedicated to the then somewhat radical idea of higher education for women, and who then created one of the first Catholic colleges for women in the US. Grateful to her, we long ago turned this celebration into our annual donor appreciation event because we are grateful to you too. I hope you can feel our appreciation even though this time it's coming through the screen. Women Who Light the Way has a much shorter history. We established it just 2 years ago as a biennial award recognizing women who have risen to leadership and can inspire future generations. We presented it first in 2018 to the late journalist Cokie Roberts, author of 4 bestsellers about the unsung women who shaped American history. As I believe Sister Helen knows, Cokie was also a well-known fan of women religious, about whom she wrote and spoke frequently. Today, we'll be presenting our second Women of the Light the Way Award to another women leader from New Orleans. But first, if you tuned in before 11:59, you saw a slideshow with special recognition for those who sponsored this event. We are grateful beyond measure for their support of student scholarships here at Ursuline College. And now, Sister Helen and Elizabeth, the imaginary stage is yours.
Thank you, Sister Chris, very much. Well, I must say it's an honor to talk with you, Sister Helen. Like many folks with us today, I distinctly remember watching Dead Man Walking in the movie theater and how deeply it moved and challenged me. You opened a lot of people's eyes to the complexities around the death penalty in our country. Now, in your most recent memoir, River of Fire, you are challenging our thinking and understanding in a different way as you tell the story of your spiritual journey in the first 40 years of your life. You actually end River of Fire with the first line of Dead Man Walking, in which you agree to be a pen pal to a death row inmate. Your book traces many changes in the Catholic Church and in your religious order, the Congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph. It also paints a picture of you as a person with a lot of passion and energy and a keen sense of humor and a firm belief that you could do just about anything. As an 8th grader, you actually declared you would grow up either to be Pope or president. So when are you running for Pope?
I don't need to. We have a wonderful Pope, Pope Francis, who defines us as the church as the field hospital out where the wounded and hurt people of society are. I love him.
It sounds like you've got a special relationship with him.
Well, he's really very keen when we have situations of people due to be executed. He quietly works behind the scenes, but he really, really cares about that.
So I have to start at the beginning here. How did you persevere through those early years of so many restrictions on your life when you joined the order? And how did Vatican II change that?
Yeah, well, it was like a different world then. You know, I think it's because religious life, see, we're what's called an apostolic order, as are the Ursulines. You have a contemplative prayer life and community, but you go out in the streets and you do active work like education and all. But we kind of had a monastic framework in that we were like semi-cloistered. Lay people couldn't, somebody like you and me having this conversation, I'd have to bring you to a parlor. You couldn't come inside the inner sanctum of the convent. Separation from the world in order to be holy, but you do your sorties out into the world to teach, but then you go back into the convent. Vatican II was just seismic. It just opened the doors and windows of the church out to the world. And the way to holiness was not to withdraw from the world, because that's where the people are. And that's where the suffering is. And that's where the needs are. And so Vatican II did that for the Catholic Church. It was the first time we ever had an ecumenical council whose sole aim was not to condemn some heresy and dogma, teaching, understanding. It was to re-engage with the world in a new way. So that liberated us nuns. And before it was strict obedience, which kind of played out in the whole church. I mean, anybody going into a parish church, you would do what Father said. If Father said this was the answer to a moral question, there was no understanding that we had individual consciences and that we had the agency, the moral agency to make decisions. But boy, it was really exaggerated in the convent. If Mother said something, that was the will of God. So I really thought going in, I was never going to make a big decision again in my life. It'd be determined for me. You go teach here, you do this. That felt kind of secure for a while. And then, of course, individual selfhood, individual initiative, individual, hey, what about this? What about this? And Vatican II unleashed that in us to affirm the selfhood of each sister. And then always within the context of community, but you could begin to see what you saw in reality. And I mean, I'll bet you a dime to a dollar that the founding of Ursuline and the education of women, you had your founder do that as well. Look at the need of women. They need to be educated. Let's get a school going. Seemed a radical idea at the time. Why educate women? Just educate them to be good wives and housewives and be the mother of a family. So radical new ideas and then putting them into effect. And so that really is what propelled me on the journey. The struggle I talk about in River of Fire was I had to break out of two cocoons. One was the spirituality that just felt that as a prayerful, contemplative person, if I prayed for the suffering people of the world, that was God's job because it was too big for any individual to handle, right? And the other cocoon that I had to break out of was a white privileged woman in a socioeconomic class because our sisters, we lived out in the suburbs, we taught in the suburbs, and I had never been. into the inner city of New Orleans, where 50% of the population of our citizens, African-American people, were suffering all kinds of stuff. And I had no idea about it because I lived in a separated neighborhood. And it's called the Lightning Chapter in River of Fire, where I woke up. Do you remember that chapter?
I do. You were hit by the Jesus lightning.
Sneaky Jesus, as it turns out, because when I did get an invitation to write that guy on death row, which is the last page of River of Fire, as you pointed out, I thought I was only going to be writing letters. I didn't know they were going to kill him. We hadn't had an execution in 20 years. So, I mean, you got to deal with sneaky Jesus, because I thought, well, I could write a few letters. I was an English major. So I would write, he would write. And then it all unfurled. He had nobody to visit him. So I just said, I'll go visit you. And then when I filled out the visitor form, he said, well, I'm a Catholic and you're a nun. Would you be my spiritual advisor? And I go, I didn't know that when he's going to be electrocuted to death, everybody's got to leave the death house except the spiritual advisor, who's going to be me.
There's sneaky Jesus again.
I mean, there you go. I mean, you get involved in these adventures and it takes you places you didn't think you'd go. But boy, let me tell you what, the way grace works, not ahead of time, but comes up under us as we need it. That's what I experienced. Even in the death house on the last days, if I thought ahead, oh my God, they're going to kill him tomorrow night at midnight, I'd come unglued inside. I had to just stay in the present moment, and the grace comes up under us as we need it.
Well, Tim Robbins, who directed Dead Man Walking, he said that nun was really in over her head. And you really didn't fully understand what you were going into, did you?
Would you believe I just talked to Tim Robbins yesterday? We had a nice, 45-minute conversation. And I quoted him back to himself. I said, Tim, you know, what you said when you were writing the screenplay of Dead Man Walking, because you could see I didn't know anything. I didn't know about the criminal justice system. I think I'm going to be writing a man and it's just going to be letter writing. I don't know what's going to happen. And you know what I found out, Elizabeth? That when you write a book, this is Dead Man Walking, and you're not coming off on page one as the expert, and people could see, wow, man, this nun doesn't know what she's getting into. It makes for more interesting reading than if on page one, here's the expert, let me tell you about the death penalty and all that. But when you can just see, hey, this nun doesn't know what she's doing. Let me see what happens to her. It makes for more interesting reading. I was thinking, Tim, I just said you were so right about that. I was so in over my head.
And I think the thing that really showed your humanity was your honesty in admitting your own flaws. And the fact that it didn't, I don't want to say it didn't dawn on you, but your fear held you back from reaching out to the victims' families. That first relationship that you had with Pat Saunier, and you didn't reach out to the families. And it's something that you did not repeat that mistake again.
You know, I had a really good editor, Jason Epstein at Random House. When I wrote the first draft of Dead Man Walking, he picked that up. See, I was just so traumatized going to death row. They're going to kill this man. I knew about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I knew about fairness and all that was happening. And I was so in his human rights that all I could hear from the victims' families, whose children had been killed. 2 teenage kids were brutally killed. A boy and a girl, David LeBlanc and Loretta Bourque, shot in the back of the head and found lying down in the mud in the sugarcane field. Horrendous crime. And the father, especially of the girl, was on the news saying, I want to pull the switch myself. And they were so angry. And I thought, well, they're not going to want to see me. The spiritual advisor now to the ones who kill their children, they're going to want to talk to me. And everybody was Catholic in this. The victim's family were Catholic, Pat Saunier and his brother Eddie, who was involved in the murder, both of them, me, and here these really angry people. And so I stayed away. And I said, I surely don't want to get into the conversation with them about the death penalty where they would say to me, sister, you care about my daughter? Well, I'm going to be there to watch that execution. You want to see him executed, right? You want justice, right? And I didn't want to get into that. Well, when my editor, Jason we were looking together at the first draft, and he comes to that part, and he just looked up at me and he said, well, Sister Helen, he said, you just said you didn't want to cause them extra pain, but it was cowardice, wasn't it? I mean, like you were scared, weren't you? I go, yeah. So he said, look, just as you said, Elizabeth, admit in your book, don't try to spin things that you always are doing things right. And it was a terrible mistake to at least try to reach out to them, even if they reject my offer, and ever after that, because I've been with 6 people who've been executed, with the 7th person on death row now who happens to be innocent, but always to reach out to the victim's family. And I learned from it, but it was horrendous. I was in all these whitewater rapids, just in these huge eddies and vortexes of stuff going on, trying to make my way.
And you actually ended up forming a relationship with David's father in particular. He was the male victim in Pat Saulnier's case. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship that you formed with David's father?
Lloyd LeBlanc. He's actually the hero of Dead Man Walking. I'm the storyteller. I made some bad mistakes, but this man. And he was really close to David. And David and Loretta had gone to a homecoming football game on a Friday night, and they never came home. And Lloyd was, the sheriff's deputy appeared at his door later the next afternoon, and he said, Mr. LeBlanc, you got to come with me to the morgue. All this is what Lloyd revealed to me as we got to be close. And there was David, and he looked down at his son, who had been so alive. And they were close. They liked to work on cars together. They were both mechanically inclined. And he said, there was my son. And he said, it just rose up inside me. And he just started saying the Our Father over the body of his son. Our Father who art in heaven. And when he came to the words in the Our Father, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive, he said, Sister, I said the words, but my heart was far from those words. I was so angry. All I wanted to do was just put my hands around the throats of these 2 brothers and kill them myself. But he said I was losing who I was. He invited me to come pray with him. Good Catholic, keep vigil before the Blessed Sacrament. I said, yeah, Mr. Ball, I'll come pray with you. What time do you pray? He says, 4 to 5 in the morning on Friday. I go, okay. So it just meant going to Baton Rouge, setting out at 2:30 to drive to this little town, St. Martinville, to pray. And there's nothing like, I had never knelt next to a man, and we said the rosary, the sorrowful mysteries of the rosary, praying through the passion and agony and death of his own son, and his gradually revealing to me his journey to forgiveness. And I'd never thought of this before. But if you even look at that word, forgive, it means to give before. And he had said to me, most people think forgiveness is a kind of weakness, like you kill my son, I'll forgive you, therefore kind of, it's okay. You're condoning it in some way. And he goes, but I was angry all the time, and I'm a kind man, and I love to help people, and I was losing that. And then at some point, he just put his hand up like this, and he said, then I said, they killed our boy, but I'm not going to let them kill me. I'm going to do what Jesus said. And he taught me the meaning. You give before. You don't let the love in you and who you are be overcome by the hate. And that's essentially what the act of forgiveness is that you're not going to lose the love. And God's grace enabled him to do that. And we became good friends. We'd move in from praying together, and then we'd do breakfast together, and then we'd periodically talk to each other. And he was amazing. He's the hero of Dead Man Walking. I'm just a storyteller, and I made a really bad mistake.
Just an extraordinary man, and what an extraordinary story that is, Sister Helen. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Totally.
The time you spent with death row inmate Pat Saulnier taught you a lot about grace, especially as he neared his execution. What did you learn?
You know what? There's a scene, and we captured it in the film. Brandon is me. The only place of privacy in the death house. You have the holding cells. You have like a lobby place, And then you have this white metal door that leads into the execution chamber. The only private place for me, because I was surrounded by men with guns, was the women's room. And I could go in the bathroom. And there's this scene, and that's just what happened. And Susan, and I just put my head against the tiles. And it was really a selfish prayer, Elizabeth, I have to confess. It was like, please, God, don't let him fall apart. Please take care of him. Please help him. Because if he falls apart, I'm going to fall apart. I'm hanging by a thread. It was terrifying. Because they're going through this protocol of death, checking off all the boxes. Okay, now it's time for the last meal. Now we're inviting the media and the witnesses in. Now the prison psychologist is coming to talk to him. You need a pill or anything. You want us to take the edge off, Sonia? It was just terrifying. And I went in that bathroom and I just prayed, please, God. And with Pat himself, we were both like feet firmly planted in midair, but helping each other. And he'd say, Sister Helen, are you okay? So he had me to be there with him. And he truly was with me. Sister Helen, are you okay? And he even said, Elizabeth, he even said to me, look, sister, you just pray that I make that walk, but you can't see this. You can't be a witness to this because it could scar you. And you know, when you think, when we're dying, if there's anything we want, is somebody who loves us to be there near us when we die. We don't want to die alone, much less die with all these witnesses watching us die and want to see us die. You couldn't be in a more hostile, negative way to die. And yet he's thinking about me. And he's saying, look, it could scar you to see this. Just pray for me. And I said to him, no way, Pat, no way. I'm going to be there for you. I have no idea what it's going to do. It's not about what's going to happen to me. But you are not going to die alone. And look at my face when they do this, and I'll be the face of Christ. Who Christ is and what the gospel stands for just gets really crystal clear in a situation like this. Because they're about to willingly render a man defenseless and put him to death. And it's really clear where Christ is. And I had the grace. I had the grace to do it. Afterwards, I threw up in the parking lot and I kind of emotionally could fall apart. And but then I was really strong. And I thought of Mary at the foot of the cross and Mary Magdalene, and you stand there because he needs you. And he looked at mine was the last face he saw before he died.
So while you were in the death house with Pat, you asked him if he was afraid of death. So I have to ask you, at that time, were you afraid of death 3 decades ago? And are you afraid of death now?
Yeah, I'm afraid of death because it has so many unknowns in it. I mean, I'm just a human being. And while I have hopes and while I have faith, to venture into the great unknown where you know this is it, when you step into this chasm, nothing's going to be the same at all, brings fear. And then, of course, that's when prayer arises inside. My sister, my beloved sister, we were really close. We were 11 and a half months apart. She died in 2016. And after she died, I was praying because we had just been nip and tuck our whole lives together. And I could hear her saying within my heart, okay, Helen, look, so I died, and you're going to die too. And she was always more physically courageous than me. When we playing and we jumping on these swings and stuff, she'd always go first. I'd be the last one on a limb. You know, come on, sis, don't be a sissy. Come on, I did the jump. You can do the jump. And those were the words that came up inside me, and they have stayed with me. You can't anticipate it ahead of time. You can't die ahead of time. Just live your life to the full. The grace is going to be there. I did it. Mama did it. Daddy did it. We all made the leap. And we're all going to be waiting for you. You just have to make the leap. So if you want to ask if I'm afraid in that sense, the human part of me, not knowing what I'm jumping into, yeah. The other side of me, I trust I'll have the grace. And really, when you come down to what the core of faith is, It's trust. It's much more than just simply believing dogmas and things. It's trust that God's love that brought us into being and will be waiting for us when we make the jump.
I love the image of your big sister Mary Ann telling you it's okay, make the leap. We'll be here for you.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And imagine though these people being executed, like William Barr right now. Then the Trump administration is trying to kill as many people as he can before they go out of office. And the lawyers are fighting for him like, man, there are 3 more people scheduled to be executed by December 8th, 9th, November 19th is Orlando Hall. And it just shows the whimsicality of the death penalty, that it is up to individual prosecutors to. And so Attorney General William Barr starts setting his sights on people to kill them. And he announced a year ago, we're going to kill 10 people. And they've been knocking them off. They've been killing these people. He's already killed 5. And now he's scheduled 3 more. And if their lawyers can secure stays in the courts long enough to get to January 20th, when we're going to have President-elect Biden take office, he's made really clear he's against the death penalty. Their lives will be saved. So look at this. They're in this cruel time warp and look at the individual people who make these whimsical decisions. You die, you don't. As if we could ever set up a system of death where it could ever be applied, however the word fairness is used. There's just no way. But these human beings are real and they're alive. And if they have their way, they're going to be dead. 3 human lives. My hope is when Pope Francis did call President-elect Biden and the 2 of them talk, I was very happy what they did put out publicly, that the emphasis on climate change and looking out after the poor and oppressed and marginated people. And that I'm just hoping that part of that little conversation in his ear from the Pope to Joe Biden is, you have these people under federal execution that are all lined up to be killed. Joe Biden can't do anything, actually, because he's not president yet. But boy, we're working with the lawyers like mad to try to save these people's lives.
I'm sure you are, definitely. I want to remind the audience, we would love to hear your questions. So take a moment to use the chat function, and we'll turn our attention to those in about a little less than 10 minutes. Now that we're talking about social justice in more depth, sister, I want to ask you, in the days after George Floyd was killed in police custody, you tweeted out, "Racism continues to permeate every aspect of American life. Inequities in income, employment, housing, healthcare, education, and racism's most blatant manifestation, repeated, constant, never-ending, pervasive police brutality against Black people." Racial justice has been in the headlines this year to an extent we could not have predicted when you wrote River of Fire. As someone whose consciousness of racism grew over the years, what advice do you have for us as to how we might grow in our awareness of injustice? In other words, how do you stay woke? You stay focused on human dignity, even when we may feel tempted to give in to cynicism or even despair.
Well, I never give people advice, Elizabeth, but I can just share what's been helpful for me in the waking up. Well, first of all, is who you mix with. Who are you with? Like if we're always with people in our own economic class, or always, if we're white, always with other white people, always. And we never venture across any kind of boundaries, that we're ever in the presence of other people who are different from us. That's what really fires consciousness. The epigraph in River of Fire is from St. Bonaventure. Ask not for understanding, ask for the fire. The fire is that human encounter and experience that changes us. The other thing is there is a huge moment now. The bestseller books are all books about understanding racism. Kendi's book, Stamped from the Beginning, where you had Jeff Davis, then in the Senate, just saying Black people by their nature are inferior and meant to be the servants of a superior white race. And we got a lot of that white supremacy stuff stoked in the last administration. I mean, we have white supremacy groups that have risen with impunity in the country. And I actually share my experience in River Fire growing up, a kid in the South, right? Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in the 40s and 50s. And it was during the Jim Crow. It was Black people couldn't sit with us on a bus. They couldn't, even Sacred Heart Church, Black people had to sit way, way over in a special section. They couldn't sit with the white people. Black kids couldn't make their Holy Communion with us. And never questioned it, because it's like when it's part of culture, see, it's kind of like fish swimming in a bowl. This is what we do. This is the way things are. But faith in the Gospels helps us question culture, see, like, wait a minute, what is the experience of Black people or families traveling where a father with his family can't even stop to go to the bathroom because they don't allow Black people in there? You can't stop at a restaurant to eat, or you can't stay at this motel. What does that do to dignity? And so it's the whole journey of compassion into the skin and experience of others. Books can really help to read them. But I talk in River Fire about waking up, that to follow Jesus meant to do justice, and justice meant being more than just charitable to people around me and praying for people, that I had to cross some boundaries. And so it's when I moved into the St. Thomas housing projects in New Orleans and worked at a place called Hope House and sat at the feet of the people and heard their stories, and went with mothers to sit with a sick child to Charity Hospital, going at 11 o'clock at night and not seeing an intern doctor till 3 a.m, sitting there with a shivering child with fever because she didn't have health insurance. And you have to witness that suffering. That there's a saying in Latin America, what the eye does not see, the heart cannot feel. So it's exposing ourselves to experiences. So when we witness for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the life of George Floyd being ebbed from him, his last words were "mama," under the knee of a white policeman. And then you hear people that say, especially privileged people who have never experienced what it is to have a cop stop you and know your life could be in danger because we're protected by a privilege, to just say, well, it's a few bad cops. You can't say this is systemic. And you really start getting into it. And that was one of the first things I learned when I was at Hope House, taught by African-American people who became my teachers, the difference between prejudice and racism. Anybody can be prejudiced against any group or whatever. But racism is when you have prejudice with institutional power behind it. And you can actually see the laws that were in place that made it against the law for real estate owners to sell property in white neighborhoods to Black people, enshrined in law, the death penalty. If you want to see racism that's blatant, it's in the application of the death penalty, because almost overwhelmingly 8 out of every 10 times the death penalty is sought only when white people are killed, because there's outrage over the death of a white person, because they have status in community. There's identification. Most of the system's white. Whereas when Black people are killed, it's not even a blip on the radar screen. And so I learned all this stuff by being there. And one of the reasons I wrote the book, it takes a lot to write a blooming book. It took me 10 blooming years to do this book. You got to do it out of love, or you ain't writing any book. I can tell you that right now. But I wrote it because maybe my experiences could be helpful to other people. We can help each other wake up,
Definitely. Well, it's been my privilege to have been able to have this conversation with you, Sister Helen. But now I want to give the audience some time to ask some questions. So I'm going to turn my microphone over to Ann McGuire from Ursuline. Ann?
Yeah. And big organizer of this event. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Sister. This was a terrific privilege. So we're asking everyone to use the chat box in order to ask questions. We have a couple coming, but we need some more. So you see the word chat at the bottom of your screen with a little icon that looks like a dialog box. So if you'd click chat, then you'll notice a large white rectangle that appears on the right, and you can put your question right where the blinking cursor is. So we have one right here. Let's see. How about, Sister, what systemically can the church, Catholic or Protestant, do to address the countless living men walking before being shot dead in the streets?
Black Lives Matter is one of the organizations. And often what us white privileged people do is we just say, well, look, we're going to have a panel. We can have some Black people come, have them talk about their experiences. We need to join in the movements where Black people are in charge so that we can be educated. And there are a number of movements that are out there now, because that's a lot for us to understand when we have white privilege. I mean, I've been stopped a whole number of times for speeding tickets, and I was never afraid for my life. And sometimes I even got slack because I was a nun. I mean, because, Louisiana's Catholic. Oh, you're a nun, I'm not going to give you a ticket. So opposite of being scared for your life. So how do we read books, get in groups, join movements, put your name in there, get in there to help support movements that are working for change, because that's how we get educated.
Thank you, Sister. And watch out for that lead foot.
Yeah. Still an ongoing process, learning process.
Okay, here we have another one. Hi, Elizabeth and Sister Helen. This is from Tom Gill. I'm here watching at Urban Community School, which is a school started by the Ursulines.
Hey.
Rosalie, OSU. Can you share some thoughts about how COVID is altering the way in which we view the prison, and whether some of the efforts to have fewer prisoners might remain post-pandemic?
Well, first of all, there has been beginning of an awakening that we need penal reform in this country. For years and years and years, we have thrown people into exile and separated them from their families and punished. We're a punishing community. We want to make people feel pain for what they have done, instead of automatically thinking restorative justice. That how can we help restore life? We punish people. And the deprivation of freedom, and more and more I've seen prison as a place of exile and separates millions of people. You know the fourth city? The fourth city is as large as 2.3 million people. And that's how many people we have in prison in this country. We're the largest incarcerator in the world. And my state, Louisiana, has been among the largest incarcerators. But there's moves now for reform. Even like fiscal conservatives just say, well, wait a minute, why throw so many citizens away? And the way we got the death penalty back, the way we got 3 strikes and you're out, the way we got life without parole, was the fear tactic of politicians that these people are so inherently dangerous in their character and their nature that we have to do these tough sentences. Now you hear more smart on crime instead of tough on crime. COVID is changing things. Well, first of all, the number of people in prisons who are just so vulnerable and can die. My man on death row right now that I'm accompanying, Manuel Ortiz. He's my 7th person I'm accompanying. He's the 3rd innocent one. That's how broken this thing is. And we were talking on the phone a couple of days ago, and I said, well, Manuel, at least by being in your own cell on death row, you're more protected. And he agreed. But prisons, imagine, I mean, you're all jammed, 62 people in a dormitory. How do you get the social distancing? And the hardest thing is, who cares? I mean, when you're considered the scum of society and so forth. So our warden is doing a great job at the Louisiana State Penitentiary. It all depends on who's your warden. whose life are you dependent on? But I think it is going to change. It's been really hard because I have been able to visit Manuel on death row. There are no visits. And to be deprived of visits is where you get your dignity. It's where you get, hey, you're a human being, because you get 1,000 signals a day that you're nothing more than disposable human waste. What an environment to live in.
Okay, thank you, Sister. Here's another question. Hello, Sister Helen. My name is Rachel, and I am a young adult living in Cleveland, Ohio. Your message was so inspiring when I was young and continued into young adulthood. Has your message to young people and other future leaders changed given the differences in our political and justice-specific landscapes since you first started your work?
Boy, it sure has, because I have seen, the leadership of young people in this country. The power of young people to create change. Look at climate change. Look at Greta Thunberg sitting in front of the parliament in Sweden and sparking a worldwide movement about climate change. Look at Parkland about gun violence. Students standing up saying we got to do something about gun violence. And there are a lot of signals young people get. You're young, you're not mature yet, you're not fully developed yet. We don't expect too much of you. You might do a few little charitable projects here and there. But boy, you look at the potency and power when young people take leadership. And that, if there's one way I've changed, it's I just have a new appreciation of just how powerful young people are.
Very good. Here's another question, Sister. Can you give some specific action steps we can do now before January 20th to help stop Trump's actions on death row? And that's from Sister Maureen Doyle, another Ursuline.
Hey, Sister Maureen. You're going to have to find your way. Right away, I would just say find out the addresses of the people about to be executed and write them a letter. One is Lisa Montgomery. Fetal alcohol syndrome. Her mother drank. It was torture is the word that the lawyers are using for what happened to her. Being raped constantly in the family, gang raped, just trafficked, unspeakable. And so she mentally begins to dissociate. First of all, when you have fetal alcohol syndrome, your brain doesn't work. She did an unspeakable crime. She killed a pregnant woman and then cut the baby out because she wanted a baby. And you look at that action, you can just say that's a heinous, evil person. You could also say that person clearly is mentally. And then now they want to kill her. Now here's William Barr making that decision. You'll be one of the next to die. And Brandon Bernard, if you go on my Twitter and my homepage, my webpage, sisterhelen.org. I just had a conversation with Brandon and his lawyer's team, and you can write to him. Imagine they're trying to kill you and you get a letter from somebody saying, look, you're a human being. I'm praying for you. I'm pulling for you. You have a dignity no one can take for what it means to you. To get those letters, I would really encourage people to do that.
Thank you, Sister. One of our other questions was about Lisa Montgomery, so that's great to hear.
Well, one thing that might save her life, y'all get this little twist of the provident God hopefully working for her. Both of her attorneys have COVID. They both contracted COVID, seriously. Uh-huh. And so in due process of the law, you're entitled to have your defense lawyer take your case. But when they've been incapacitated by a sickness, all they need to do is get an extension of time long enough till Joe Biden can come in and he won't be killed. So maybe that providentially that might help. They're filing a motion to a court for a delay till the lawyers get well. And just say, well, look, go get another lawyer. These cases are extremely complex. You can't just like move people on a chessboard. Okay, now you're going to be the lawyer. So anyway, hopefully that might help save our life. You know what? I love the lawyers. I have been with these lawyers that have tried to save lives. And believe me, you don't get a lot of kudos in society for representing people who have done terrible things and standing up, for their human rights. You don't get invited to cocktail parties. You can have a judge treat you with great disrespect in the courtroom. Anytime you raise an objection, overrule. But yet anytime the prosecution, sustain. And these lawyers fight for life. I love them. I love being in their company.
Sister, that was terrific. We could probably talk for another hour, and we do have other questions, but Sister Christine is waiting to share.
For my award, I can't wait to see this award. The box arrived, just a big box.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, ready. Thank you, Sharonda. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Elizabeth, for being such an important part of this so that we could honor you, Sister Helen. Sister Helen, you've inspired so many of us with the message in both of your books, and you've been even more inspirational today as you speak with us here. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Ursuline's Women Who Light the Way Award recognizes women who are leaders in their field and can inspire other women to greatness. In the Ursuline tradition, we focus not on those who achieve leadership for the sake of personal power. Rather, we focus on those who, like you, Sister Helen, direct their efforts to the greater good, to contributing to the reign of God in our world. Publicly, we uphold Sister Helen Prejean as an example for our students and others, as a woman who has promoted social justice tirelessly by speaking out against racism and affirming the humanity of people who most of us, most of the time, would likely forget, those on death row. Thank you. Sister Helen, when it came to choose an actual commemorative award for you, we wanted something that would sparkle with the light of our theme. So we decided that you should have a sculptural work in glass by a Cleveland artist. This piece is by Mark Suffolk, and I hope that when you see the way the light is reflected on its many facets, you will think of the many, many lives you've touched, the many people whose stories you've illuminated, and this women-focused college in Cleveland that is so grateful to you. Do you have your prize ready?
The box arrived. Yes, I have it. I have it. I get to open it?
Yes,
Now,
the big reveal.
the big reveal. Now, this is so exciting. Seeing this whole thing of glass and light, a lot of times when I have received an award, I talk about myself as just a prism that the light shines through. And Pope Francis recently, in his homily during the Angelus on All Saints' Day, said saints are holy ones that God, through whom God passes. God passes through all of us, each of us. So I now open this box. Take out this paper. It's well protected. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my. This is substantial. I don't want to drop it. Can y'all see it? Look at it. And it has these different facets. Well, look, see, you got this big. So I did Mark do a sketch of this, that the purple, wow, look, that's a vortex. And that's the dark. And then you have the light. So it's got to be death and life. And then look at this. Can y'all see these facets here in the glass? Let's see, I'm trying to put it so you can see. The facets, it's like a lot of little facets here. And when you look at it, you can, it reflects the dark or the death and the light together in the spectrum of light. It is very heavy. This is a substantial piece of glass. It's beautiful. Thank you. I love it. Tell Mark. Please tell Mark. Is he there? And Mark, are you in the audience? Is he present?
I don't think he's with us.
He's present right here.
But he knows that it was for you.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And it has my name at the top. And then it has Ursuline and Women Who Light the Way. Oh, that's very, very beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's an honor for us to be able to honor you. So thank you.
Thanks for everybody being here today. And then those in the sound of our voice. And thanks for all those who asked questions. And Elizabeth, great job. Great talking to you. It's like we were sitting at the kitchen table.
Well, thank you so much, Sister Helen.
Yeah, thank you.
A quick note before we sign off. Sister Helen's latest book, A River of Fire, My Spiritual Journey, is available at your local independent bookstore and on Amazon. And it is truly an inspiring and encouraging read. We will also be sending everyone a follow-up email with links to the book, a new PBS documentary about Sister Helen, so look out for that one, and an interactive module that Sister has created to help everyone read through her new book. From all of us at Ursuline College, thank you so much for joining us today. Next year, God willing, we look forward to seeing you all again in person. Take care. Thank you, everyone.